of the Nakota and Dakota people, and my reservation is the Fort Peck Assiniboine Sioux Reservation in the northeast corner of Montana. As you can see, with my title, I currently serve as the Senior Director of Policy and Programs at the National Native Children's Trauma Center. And the Trauma Center is a partner with the Tribal Law and Policy Institute and the Resource Basket from Alaska. And the three of our centers have combined to be the Tribal Youth Resource Center for American and Alaska Native tribes, funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, either as grantees or any tribe across the United States that would like technical assistance and training can reach out to the TYRC for PTA. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. It's going backwards. Oh, this is before we begin. That's the one I want, but go back one more. Nope, other way. One more. There. So our TA Center is funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Preventions, and just want to make sure that you all know the opinions, findings, or conclusions, or even the recommendations that we express today in this training do not necessarily reflect those of the Department of Justice. Okay, now we can go on to opening. Next slide, please. Thank you. So most of you may not know this, but today is my very last day before I retire from the National Native Children's Trauma Center. In fact, when this webinar is over, this is my last sort of official webinar that I will be doing for the Trauma Center. So I'm pretty excited about it, obviously, but I just want us in the opening to think about what's next for all of us. Think about setting an intention today that perhaps something gets sparked inside your spirit because of what you're learning on this webinar, or that this opening is bringing about a confirmation that you need to move on to something new or do some next steps in your programming, whatever that looks like. So I just want us to take the moment to pause, take a deep breath, set our intentions for this webinar, set our intentions for the day, and be open to and set our intentions for whatever the universe has for us next. Next slide, please. We're going to start out with some definitions, and because I want us all to make sure that we're all on the same page as we're thinking about positive childhood experiences. So we've done a lot of work around the ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, and a lot about the impact on development, the impact on worldview, the impact on relationships, the impact on spiritual well-being, and how negative impact, I should say, that ACEs have had throughout our lifespan. So it's as we think about it, it has felt as if there was no hope. And we know that we can heal from our traumatic experiences and our traumatic pasts. And the positive childhood experiences research is really, I'm pretty excited about, because finally we're hearing the good news that some positive childhood experiences can offset the adverse experiences that a child, a youth, or an adult may experience. So also we're going to be talking in terms of risk factors and protective factors, and the impact it has on whether or not positive childhood experiences can outweigh the negative experiences. So the risk factors are basically those biological or psychosocial, family or community or cultural cultural events or experiences that are associated with a high likelihood of negative outcomes, like living in an unsafe house, going to school in an unsafe school building or classroom, living in an unsafe community has a very big impact on our children and our youth's well-being. So the protective factors, on the other hand, are those factors that are characteristics of the individual or their household, their family, or their community or their schools that are associated with really impacting risk factors. So the bigger and better protective factors, the more it offsets the risk factors. Going to look a little bit at shame because I think that's a big part of the conversation when we're talking about how to think about positive childhood experiences, and just understanding that sometimes our children and youth, or even our adults, experience a sense of shame just for being who they are. They don't feel smart enough. They don't feel competent enough. They don't feel adequate. They feel inferior or worthless. And a big piece of the conversation around positive childhood experiences is helping our children, youth, and adults gain mastery over their emotions, over their behaviors, and gain mastery and skills and or build on those mastery or skills. I always give the example of when I was in high school, basketball is king in Montana, in tribal communities. And so every year I'd hear a coach or a teacher overhear them talk about how, oh yeah, he's doing better because it's basketball season, and he wants to make sure he play on that basketball team. And everybody thought that it was it was as if a student said, oh yeah, I want to play, therefore I better step it up. I better uh, do better in class. I better come to school on time. I better not be truant, that sort of thing. But what I think we're finding out now is that when basketball season came around, those students that didn't have an attachment to the school suddenly felt a sense of belonging, right? They're belonging to a team. They also had a sense of mastery. They were good ball players. They knew they were good. They knew they were skilled. And they had a sense that they could to win as a team, and that part of belonging as a team. So that is a big foundation. And when we think about removing shame from when we're working with our children or youth. Obviously, resilience is a process or outcome of being able to adapt. I think we think resilience is being happy, but it really is being able to adapt to the challenges that we face. And some of the adaptations aren't just for negative situations, but for positive. Going to Europe for the first time can be very stressful because we don't know which lines, we don't know the language, we don't know any of those things. But after we've done the first trip, we feel much more competent and able, and we've built our resilience and adapted to the kinds of ways that maybe going to Paris is different than going to Denver, right? And then positive childhood experiences are those experiences in childhood where a child has a sense of belonging, a sense of connection. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Also, I want to make sure that you guys know that you can make a comment, tell a story, or ask a question anytime during this presentation. I don't mind being interrupted. I think that we all learn better when we learn together. Next slide, please. All right. Okay. Psychologists define resilience as a process of adapting, right? We don't break, we bend, we bounce back. If we're in, much like if we're in rough waters, they're certainly painful and difficult and that can really negatively income us, but there are many aspects in life where we gain control and modify, we adapt, we grow, we change, and it empowers us to grow and change more. We like to talk about stress being okay. It's toxic stress that creates adverse experiences or adverse outcomes. So all of us need to be a little bit nervous, a little bit excited, a little bit ready to meet a challenge, and instead of being passive and not even wanting a challenge at all. So that's really what resilience is. It's not that we're not ever going to experience difficulties or distress, but that we or suffer adversity in our lives, but in fact that we are able to adapt to or learn from or adjust or find supports from other people and family and community for ourselves to build our resilience. Next slide, please. And there is a lag. Sorry about that, guys. So how do we build resilience? So according to a lot of the research, and this is from the American Psychological Association, it's really helping our children and youth and adults build connections. What does that mean? Build positive relationships, belonging to a group. So I love to tell the story about a group of students who we were working with in a school system that had experienced tragic loss of students to suicide. And one of the things we did was ask the students that were in proximity, either by relationship, they were related, or friends, or by being in the classroom, same classroom as the students that had died, who in that school, what adult in that school did they feel like cared about kids and or that cared about them. And, there was most tragically, nearly all but one of the students that died were girls, and they belonged to a group of girls who were influencing each other in bad behavior in school. So they were getting a lot of discipline referrals to the office. So anyway, we went to those students and asked them to identify that adult. And then we said the adult, you've been identified by this student as someone who cares about the kids in the school, and in particular cares about them. And so we had like a 7th grade girl identify a high school girls basketball coach. We had a sophomore in high school identify his 7th grade English teacher, that sort of thing. It didn't have to be their homeroom teacher. They got to identify. And then once we got parental permissions, we sat with them and we created what we called a self-care plan, which was really a safety plan, and basically asked them, how do you feel better when you feel bad? And they said things like, listen to music, play basketball, talk to my grandma, talk to my friends, all of that sort of thing. And so we wrote it all down. And then, of course, we gave them other resources like hotline numbers and local numbers to reach out. Now, at the end of the school year, because the suicides unfortunately occurred in the fall semester and spring semester, we asked those adults to just meet with those students twice during the semester and ask how their self-care plan was going, how they were taking care of themselves, what kind of strategies they were using, that sort of thing, and just to check in. At the end of the school year, what was really fascinating, and what we didn't count on, is those students who had permission to participate in this intervention, they had quite a few discipline referrals, and in spring semester those discipline referrals went to zero. Whereas the girls that did not have the parental permission to participate, theirs went up. Their discipline referrals went up. So again, prioritizing relationships. We like to say at the trauma center that relationship is the best evidence-based treatment model for healing trauma for our children and our youth. Again, helping our youth and our children, our adults, and ourselves take care of our bodies, being able to practice mindfulness, being present in the room, avoiding negative outlets, learning to do some some self regulation around negative emotions, that sort of thing. A good one is to find purpose. A lot of times, I think that one of the things that JDCs, you'd see the little orange suits and they're out there taking garbage out of removing garbage from the ditches. That probably doesn't feel very meaningful to an adolescent, right? But what kinds of activities could feel helpful, could feel like they have purpose, and what could help them move some of your youth towards those goals, and really thinking and really giving them honestly an opportunity for self-discovery, which is what we'll talk about when we're talking about spiritual and cultural ways of supporting youth. And then embracing healthy thoughts, helping ourselves learn to do thought stopping, which is just if we're starting to ruminate on a traumatic event or some angry situation, and we just yell stop to ourselves and try to think about something else. Again, learning to adapt to change, being hopeful. How do we maintain hope for ourselves, for our youth, and how do we help our children, youth do the same thing? And then really destigmatizing seeking help, making it a part of the conversation, making it a part of development, saying that seeking help is a mature adult thing to do, that sort of thing when we're working with youth. Any comments or questions? Next slide, please. Here's a little video on resilience. I hope it works. Antonia, can you start it? Thank you. There we go. Maybe hold it down. Don't you love technology? We're going to do it. We're going to get it done. By golly. Yes, if we have to do it this, oh. Okay, it looks like we have problems with the internet connection. So we won't have the benefit of the video, but I will try to, I believe that it's embedded in the presentation and that you will have access to the slides and hopefully you'll be able to watch it on your own. Okay, next slide. Oh, I keep hearing something like it wants to play. Let's just. Sure. Let me give a try from my screen. Okay. Okay. Oh, I can't screen share while other participant is sharing. Can I do it now? Yes. Sharing. Clicking out.
Brains. They are everywhere. In the world's gentlest places and its harshest. In this unforgiving environment, some brains exhibit troubling signs. Addiction, illness, depression, social disorder. Yet others thrive. Why have some brains developed the ability to cope in harsh conditions while others struggle? It is one of nature's great secrets.
Hi. Hello? This is amazing. But I just need to clarify a few things. This great secret? It's actually science. Severe adversity isn't good for any brain. But it is true that some brains do better than others in the face of significant challenges.
Oh, a scientist. Yes, I agree. This is a great secret of science.
Great, yes, but not a secret. Let me explain. We're born with brains, but our brains change as we grow. They develop based on experiences we have, and different brains respond to experiences in different ways. Okay, thanks. I'll let you get back to it.
Indeed. Some brains show robustity and strongitude, while others...
Sorry, we scientists use the word resilience. Some brains are more resilient than others.
Yes, resiliences.
Resilience?
Resilience. Revenge of the vortex.
Resilience is a result of the interplay between genes and life experiences. It's a brain's ability to maintain good functioning under adversity.
Resilience makes us invincible.
Nothing makes us invincible. What resilience does is to give less leverage to negative factors in our lives and tip the balance in favor of positive outcomes.
Resilience. Fate's legendary prize.
Whoa, no. Some people are born with more resilience than others, but resilience can also be built over time. It's a big project involving parents, caregivers, teachers,
Kith, kin, karaoke comrades,
soccer coaches, counselors,
pastry chefs, associate producers, even millennials. Like a barn raisin times at home.
Yeah. In fact, we scientists believe strong brain architecture is the foundation for resilience. And, oh, look over there.
Oh, yes. A young brain returns after months of isolation and adversity. No words can describe what this poor brain has suffered.
There are words that describe it. We scientists call it toxic stress.
Toxic stress lies in words.
No, that's not. No. Stress happens inside the body. It's the fight or flight system kicking in. But if stress hormones are elevated too high and for too long, it can have negative effects on the brain and body.
Stress, a nasty poison.
Not all stress, just toxic stress. With the right supports, we can make severe stress tolerable, which means it won't do lasting damage. Stress can even be positive because it helps us to learn problem solving and coping skills, which leads us back to resilience.
Alas, this brain is resilienceless.
No, it isn't. Let me explain. Remember when I talked about giving less leverage to negative experiences and tipping the scale in a positive direction? Well, here's a little something I've been working on. It's a really amazing metaphor. Here it goes. I call it the resilience scale.
Resilience scale. Protective armor plates.
Shiny, but no. The resilience scale helps us understand why some brains are more resilient than others.
The resilience scale sends out invisible resilience rays that's
Really just a scale. See? It's a beam being held up by a fulcrum.
full of crumbs.
Geez, no, a fulcrum. You know, like high school Never mind. Let me just clean this up. See, negative experiences add weight to one end of the beam, and positive factors add weight to the other end. Ideally, we want the scale to tip toward the positive side and lead toward positive life outcomes.
The brain's future literally hangs in the balance.
The position of the fulcrum can be understood as our original capacity for resilience. It's something like our genetic starting position. Remember the young brain that was struggling to survive? Look, it started life with the fulcrum off center, giving more leverage to negative experiences, serious stuff like abuse, neglect, and chaotic environments. That means positive factors like responsive relationships, safe environments, and learning opportunities had less leverage. Over time, the negative load shifted the fulcrum even farther in a negative direction.
Tragedy.
Not at all. Right now, this brain is experiencing poor health, but with help, the scale can be tipped toward more positive outcomes. The first thing we can do is to stop negative experiences from stacking up. Then we can add more positive factors, loading up the positive side of the scale. And we're not done. We can work to shift the fulcrum in a way that favors positive outcomes.
The fulcrum, an amazing instant fix-it button.
No, it's a process. It involves many supportive people and plenty of time. Remember? This brain is still young, so adult brains can work with it to relieve toxic stress and teach coping skills. In early childhood, these efforts can push the fulcrum a considerable distance.
Childhood, filled with fascination and fulcrum flexibility.
Sort of, but there are other sensitive developmental periods that are windows of opportunity, like adolescence. And even if this brain doesn't get help until adulthood, change is still possible. It will take more support, and the change will be less dramatic. But any fulcrum can be moved to make positive outcomes more achievable.
The bad experiences disappear.
I'm afraid not. It's hard to undo the effects of past negative experiences, and it takes time. But we can eventually relieve the burden of those negative experiences. Our little brain can get the help it needs to adapt, recover, and enjoy good health and wellness.
And everyone, everywhere can become more resilient for eternity.
Why not? With the right support, everyone everywhere can become more resilient.
I'm so glad I saved humanity. It's been a majestic experience.
Yeah, me too. Well done.
Okay. I'm going to stop share, Antonio, so you can come back on with the slides. So I love that video. It does so much to, next slide, please. It does so much to really, I feel like, give us a lot of hope as we think about how it is that we can be a person who helps build on the positive protective factors, build on their resilience, and help them develop their own coping skills and recovery skills. Next slide, please. So the research that around positive childhood experiences started looking at what are the differences in people, instead of, why are some people more resilient, even children in the same family, right? We all know those families where, there's the one who's a brilliant student, the one who's a brilliant athlete, the ones who's a brilliant musician, and then the other, and then maybe a fourth child who seems to struggle with relationships, struggle in school, doesn't seem to have any interest in any outside activities. And so what's different, and how do we do this? And how do we look at what's different about that child and his sibling, or that child and his peer in their resilience? And it really has come down to the kinds of supports and experiences they had that were really positive. And so they asked these questions of these youth and adults as the sort of the core positive experiences that have helped build resilience and adaptability for children, youth, and adults. So the questions were: before the age of 18, I was able to talk with the family about my feelings. Before the age of 18, I felt that my family stood by me during difficult times. Before the age of 18, I enjoyed participating in community traditions. Now, that could be powwows, that could be county fairs, that could be homecoming games, whatever. Before the age of 18, I felt a sense of belonging in high school. It's a big piece of the conversation, and I think it really has to influence how we think about how we connect our programming with the local school district. Before the age of 18, I felt supported by friends. Before the age of 18, I had at least 2 non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in me. I remember a sixth grade English teacher that I felt very supported by, and she helped build my mastery in writing. I also had a high school, when I was a junior, had another English teacher, and she built my interest in classical literature, and that I had a skill about reading it. So it doesn't have to be at the same time. It just has to be non-parental adults. And then before the age of 18, I felt safe and protected by an adult in my home. So a lot of us have grown up in households that, maybe there wasn't enough to eat. Maybe we were always at the risk of losing housing. There was stressful things, right? But if we felt safe when we were home, that's really all we needed. That really helps build a good foundation, a sense of safety, and not just having a house, but feeling not just physical safety, but psychological safety as well. Okay, so I have a question. All of us always automatically take these tests when we're doing these kinds of trainings. Everybody feel like you've got some really positive experiences or have a really good PCE score? Okay, yes. Oh, 3 of 7. Okay. Would you mind sharing which 3? Joseph or Joe? So, cool. Yeah, me too. I had a 4th. My grandmother, I always talk about my grandmother as she wasn't a little round, chubby cookie baking granny who was very kind. She was a camel smoking, Oli beer drinking, tough broad. But even though we were poor and she struggled with alcohol, I always felt safe in our home, no matter what. She never ever allowed anyone into our household that didn't feel safe. Selena has participated in community traditions, friends, and adults. Yep, it makes a huge difference. So just know that even if the kids are insulting you or don't seem to appreciate the kinds of efforts that you're making on their behalf, they'll remember someday. And you really are helping build positive experiences for those youth and helping build their resilience. Next slide, please. Thanks, Selena. Yes, it's good. It's good to have extended family and find that unconditional love somewhere. So as much as we don't want our kids to experience adverse childhood experiences, the absence of positive things actually might be more harmful than having those experiences. And so that it becomes almost a moral imperative to think about how do we help create positive experiences for our children and youth, so that because that seems to be much more important in building resilience than of course we want to end child abuse and neglect and sexual abuse and all of that, but we need to really, I think what we can do now is really focus on the positive. How do we build resilience? Next slide, please. So again, relationship, helping that youth identify someone that they can trust and talk to. Doesn't have to be a parent, doesn't have to be a grandparent, doesn't have to be a teacher or a coach, can be you. It can be the shop teacher, the Boy Scout leader, any of that. And then helping them identify who they're going to turn to for support during difficult times. It makes a big difference if they feel like they can already reach out, and helping them like we did with those students, the story I told, of letting that adult know that they think that they care about them. It's very flattering for adults, especially when you say, really, all you've got to do is check in. You know, you don't have to bring them into your home. You don't have to clothe them, feed them. You just have to give positive regard in their direction. Doing that with at least 2 adults, helping a youth identify an adult who can help them feel safe in their home. And that means somebody that, you know, can say, okay, when you don't feel safe, what is it you can do? What kind of strategies? Call 911. I'm on the ground floor. I can go out the window and go to grandma's house. I can lock my door, whatever it is. If there's just loud noises, if they aren't in real danger, obviously if they're in real danger, they need to escape, but it's those sort of strategies that keep them feeling safe. And then helping them, the youth understand and learn about what being a good friend is, and how to be good friends to themselves and to their friends, and how to identify their own good friends. Makes a huge difference, as you guys, a couple of you already said, really having good connection with good friends. Next slide, please. Cultural supports, right? And I think that's a big piece of the conversation we've been having with the Tribal Youth Resource Center, with all of the tribes that we work with, is how do we infuse culture into what we do? And see, these are just some ideas. In being able to participate, I think the big piece is, for instance, many of our youth are in really chaotic households, so they've never been taught how to offer tobacco. For my Northern Plains tribe, how to offer tobacco to an elder or a spiritual leader, how to ask for help or ask for teaching in a respectful way. So they just don't ask, and they don't know who to ask. So helping them being able to get their Indian names, get their spirit names, teaching them the tribal ways of connecting, just learning how to, as again, a Northern Plains tribal person, just learning how to smudge and why we smudge and what we think about, what we should be thinking about as we bring the tobacco over ourselves, and how do we do that? Again, teaching some of the really good stories about our tribal history and how we survive. Any other thoughts around cultural supports or traditions or cultural ways that you're using with your students, or I mean your youth or children or adults? As your answer, if anyone's answering, I'll just move on to again, really making sure that somehow you are connecting your work with the schools, because it really does make a difference, particularly in high school, and being an advocate for those youth in high school. I think that so many times on reservations, the schools, when a student is in a juvenile detention center for a couple of weeks, the school just marks them absent. There's no effort made to try to keep the student up with their studies, or, you know, bring their homework to them, or do those sorts of things. It becomes really important that there is someone in the school district that pays attention and is willing to do those sorts of things. Supporting your youth in extracurricular activities. And then again, anybody have any ideas about what else or what they've done in the past? Anybody answering anything yet? And in fact, you don't even have to type. Why don't you just come off mute? Or can they? Antonia, can they come off mute?
I will have to give them permission to speak.
Okay, well, maybe they can raise their hand if they want to speak. Okay, next slide, please. Again, using Northern Plains cultural ways, thinking about contemporary schools or contemporary coup stories, teaching youth the coping strategies. helping them understand what the impacts of their traumatic experiences have had on their body, on their thinking, and how they feel, helping them identify sounds or smells or postures or physical contact, or even being ignored, right? That hurts deeply in social settings and in care settings. Learning coping skills like mindfulness and deep breathing, some meditation, physical activities, reframing how they think, letting go of some of the pain, letting go of some of the expectations. I think that's a huge piece. I know youth expect a youth in JDC expecting a parent to show, and the parent doesn't show, and helping them reframe and think about how they can think differently about what is the meaning behind their parents' behavior. Maybe they didn't have the car that day. They didn't have gas. Maybe dad got a job and he couldn't, and that was his first day, whatever it might be. Helping them suspend their suspicions until they find out what really happened. Next slide, please. This is the last slide. So I want to ask you all now, if you can unmute Antonio. Anybody have any story or comment or question about what a cultural event that has helped a youth you've worked with, or a spiritual practice, and or be willing to talk about some of the cultural and spiritual practices that support you in your well-being? My goodness, everybody's so shy today. You're all permitted to talk anytime you want. You don't need a camera to talk, do you? Nope, you don't need to have a camera. Oh, unless you're on a phone, but then still you could. But thank you. Well, in that case, let's move on to the next slide. And just want to let everyone know that as we open a door, we should bring it to a close. Jam sessions. Oh, cool. Thank you. We'll bring it to a close, and know that I wish you all well in the future. I know you're doing really good work. Thank you for taking the time today to come to this webinar. And thank you for all of the work that you do on behalf of the children and youth in your communities and in your families. Aho. I'll turn it over to Antonia.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to pull up a evaluation. So if you could please take the evaluation, we would really appreciate it for future OLEs.
I do believe that you will have access to the presentation, correct, Antonia?
Yes, I will send it out in a follow-up email.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Selena.
So I just want to jump in here and just kind of have a closing thought. I just want to thank Marilyn so much for all of your dedicated work and everything that you've done on behalf of the National Native Children's Trauma Center, and all of the healing work that you've done for tribal communities. You know, you've done that locally, you've done that at a state level, and then at a federal level. So we just really appreciate all the work that you've done for Indian country. And thank you so much for today and sharing your wisdom and your knowledge, and just excited for you to enter this next phase in your life. And I know you'll continue to do that healing work. So I'll be excited to see what's next for you. But I just wanted to thank you. I'm sitting here with my 8-month-old baby, and she's actually a baby that we took in, one of our relatives that we took in. And so I just feel honored to be able to have worked with you, and really grateful for all of the work being done that everyone on this webinar is doing for young people and for the children in your communities. So thank you all so much for participating today, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thanks, everyone. Have a great day.